Hi all, welcome to this new adventure we're starting and trying out. Welcome to the Sound Diaries Coffee Edition. In 2024, I started a blog called the Sound Design Diaries. The goal of the blog was always to have a conversation with other peers, and it wasn't quite doing that, so I took a break from it last summer, and it is now returning in the form of a podcast. We're gonna try it out. I changed the name slightly, and I'm now calling this the Sound Diaries Coffee Edition. And it's called this because the idea is to gather a group of friends with different roles and backgrounds in the audio industry for a chat to last about 1 hour while drinking coffee or the panelist drink of choice, of course. We're going to talk about music, sound design, about the latest news and developments in the industry in a completely casual way, and hopefully you'll enjoy it too. I'm going to introduce the guests in a second, but before I do, I have to thank the team at my company Sonora Cinematic, which is sponsoring this. And like real pros, we even have a discount code for the listeners. You can use the code Coffee and Sound, all in capital, one word, at checkout for a 10% discount on sonoracinematic.com. We make some pretty cool stuff, if I can say that myself, and our Kontakt catalog features some really beautiful instruments, and we have now expanded in creating a series of instruments for Audio Modern Soundbox. Today, we are actually releasing a new free product, Dark Veil Essentials, which is a stripped-down version of the full library Dark Veil from our Founders Locker series, which is only £9, by the way. We included a couple of carefully chosen sounds from the library, enough to write with, enough to explore, and hopefully invite you into the world of our sounds. But without wasting any more time, let's introduce the guests. I'm gonna go in order as they appear on my screen. From the Charlotte area, North Carolina, we have my friend Joe Miller, owner of the WavLab, beautiful recording studio, but also sound engineer, composer, sound designer, and my partner in crime on a few projects so far, I would say. How are you, Joe?
Very good. Thank you for the introduction.
And then from New York, but also New Jersey, we were discussing. We had James David Redding, Emmy Award-winning sound editor, sound designer. This is the man behind the sound of the Queen's Gambit, The Americans, and many more super famous shows. Hi, James. Thank you for being with us.
Hello.
And then from Hanoi, Vietnam, we have Nikolai Muller-Nielsen. I'm sure I butcher your name, but my name gets butchered all the time, so I think that's only fair. owner of the amazing Bunker Samples. So officially my competitor, I guess, but also friend, and also composer, viola player, and violin player, and much more. Hello.
Thank you.
And last but not least, someone much closer geographically to me.
I was wondering what you were going to say next.
That's right. Matthew Collings, also calling from Edinburgh, Scotland. And Matt, what is your role at Kronos? Head of product? Is that
Yes.
still it? Head of product of Kronos, but also musician, sound designer, composer, and we share an obsession for Smashing Pumpkins, Sonic Youth, and other bands that date us instantly, I guess, when we're in the company.
Right, yeah. And inadvertently as attending pub quizzes when we just mean to go.
That's
for a
right.
drink.
Me and
That's
Matt
our other
have
shared
this
thing
funny
used to
story
happen.
that every time that we decide to meet in town and we choose a random pub, there is a pub quiz. No matter where we go, we always seem to
Always.
pub quiz.
No matter where we go, no matter what time of day, no matter what day, there's always seems to be a pub
That's
quiz
right.
on, and it creeps up on us.
Exactly. So I think that the thing that we're gonna talk the most about today is the unfortunate news of Native Instruments preliminary insolvency, which was the news that was shared, I think, a couple of weeks ago now. So we've all had the time to think about it, to cry about it, and to sort of think what it means. I'm going to go for a round of thoughts and hopefully start a conversation. I'm just going to say a couple of things myself. I think it's as when these things happen, very often it's very hard to separate facts from speculations and the industry sentiment, let's call it. Then maybe a week ago, there was a statement from the CEO, which received mixed review. Let's say that is kind of unclear exactly what is going to happen. But I think that an important thing to keep in mind is that preliminary insolvency is, and I'm not a lawyer and I'm not someone familiar with German law, but preliminary insolvency is not bankruptcy. It sounds from what I read and heard that it's some sort of, shall we call it, court supervised restructuring. So it is very unlikely to result in the immediate interruption of all services. Then none of our native instruments software and hardware is suddenly not going to work. But there is that. So let's start talking about it. Who wants to go first?
I mean, I'll start because I probably paid the least amount of attention to it. But that's just because Native Instruments and all the subsidiaries that they now own, like Isotope and stuff like that, really has probably the least amount of effect on me. I own Complete 13 or something like that, just because I was like, oh, I'll buy this, and I use Reactor and Kontakt, but very not as much as I was hoping to when I bought them. And I think the bigger thing for me is Isotope, but even that, as far as what I've been doing recently with noise reduction and such, I've been using Isotope even less, and part of that's because the development has fallen really far behind. So
are you in spectral layers more? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely in spectral layers more. I'm in DX Revive more. I'm using those tools more. So Isotope sort of really fell far behind that. I was like, okay, it kind of makes sense what's going on. And also it was like, kind of like you said, Alessandro, like, it doesn't mean it's going away. It just means that something's happening. It's happened before. We've all lost software, hardware, and everything else throughout our careers that, yeah, it sucks, but somebody will fill the void if they haven't already.
And by the way, an important thing that needs to be said is that it sounds like everybody's saying that Isotope, Plugin Alliance, Brainworks, and whatever else is in the group, people keep saying that are completely unaffected, which I don't quite get, because obviously I can see how they are maybe operatively completely independent from Native Instruments, but I guess if it's the same owner and the same owner is, we're talking about 50 million in debt or something like that, I don't see how they are completely unaffected. But people seems to talk specifically about Native Instruments, and they seem to think that the other brands are going to be completely unaffected, but I don't know.
I think it's kind of like a couple that has, they're married, but they have separate bank accounts.
Yes.
Like I think it's kind of in that vein of like, yeah, it sucks that your husband lost all of his money, but
No, I'm good.
Yeah, well, obviously I was freaking out when the news came out because I developed exclusively for Kontakt, and I was like,
I
oh
think,
shit,
I
there goes
think
my
me and
livelihood.
you are probably the most affected by this whole thing. But yeah.
Yeah, also, on the personal side, I use RX all the time. I've spent thousands of hours in RX, but I haven't upgraded since version 9 because it does everything I need it to. So I'll probably be fine on that front. But Kontakt, that was big. But then I started reading everything I could about what it actually means. And as you said, Alessandro, preliminary insolvency, that is to avoid bankruptcy. It's not a bankruptcy.
Yeah.
It's to try to avoid that happening.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the guy that's in charge of it, his name is actually Mr. Martini. He has a reputation for saving companies, for avoiding firing people, and it's just about restructuring the company. Maybe get rid of the parts of the business that doesn't make a lot of money. But lucky for me and you, as far as I can read, Kontakt is the biggest part of Native Instruments. It will make them all the money. So I don't think it's going to go away. I really think it's going to be okay in some form or another.
There is in all the meetings that I've had with Native Instruments, and well, not specifically with Native Instruments, but with sort of like shareholders and people that are closer to the company, I keep hearing that. Now, don't quote me on this, but something like the amount of the user base of Kontakt is as big as all the other business units of Native Instruments put together. So it's obviously a massively important ecosystem, and I don't see it. You know, it's obviously very valuable, even if we're talking, you know, purely on a financial standpoint. I think it's too valuable to be let go. But yeah.
Even if it does, somebody's going to buy it because it's a money printing machine.
Yeah. I think that it's. I think like talking specifically about you know, like putting purely my developer hat on and kind of letting go of you know, like of my role as a musician, as a composer. I think that what is scaring us is that there is this funny thing when, you know, the news is out, and I think that for 48 hours we probably sold 0 Kontakt instruments, and luckily we had, you know, like we expanded to Soundbox a while ago, so that is going very well, and maybe we can talk about that later on. I want to talk about alternatives as well. But then they slowly started again. But there is obviously this panic when you put something out. And one thing is the reality, but then the other thing is like the sentiment that users and customer feel. And that's kind of harder to deal with. And I think that it does play into the sort of erosion of trust into Native Instruments. And so there is that, I think.
Well, it's like, look what happened to Waves not too long ago. Everybody used to love Waves plugins, and then they did their subscription-only thing and pissed everybody off, and everybody's like, all right, here's all the Waves alternatives, and they lost a lot of the confidence.
Yeah.
You know?
And like Waves
when
it's also similar. It's also a similar thing in the way they keep selling, you know, products that are
25
years old. I mean, exactly. Like the EQ name and the compressor name that are escaping me. I keep thinking of Pro EQ. That's Renaissance.
Max
Thank
Bass.
you. Right, Renaissance. That's what the one I was thinking about. It's like, you know, I've owned that thing since buying like the gold or platinum, whatever, like some 25 years ago for like a lot of money. So yeah, I think it's a similar thing. Yeah.
I was going to say that Kontakt and Reactor are easily as old as any of those. They're, you know,
absolutely.
The reason why it's called Native Instruments is that they wanted to make high-powered tools that run in the box rather than as part of a hardware add-on. That's why the company's called Native Instrument.
Yeah.
So, you know, Reactor was their first product. I don't know the exact release date, but it must have been at least 20, more like 25 years old. So,
absolutely.
I mean, that's one of the most interesting things about the whole Native Instrument situation is that they are such a like long-standing player, even more so than Waves. So yeah, it's interesting that, you know, these things have been around for such a long time. Are still going and are still relatively successful. I mean, at least those ones, the Waves ecosystem and the native one. There's many others that have sort of fallen by the wayside, but it's kind of fascinating that they're still going and that people love those products as well, and they've done a great job of actually keeping them alive and keeping them moving forward. Wrestling with a code base that's even 10 years old, as some of our stuff is an enormous challenge. I wouldn't want to think about one that's 20 plus years old. So I give them credit for that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, were you about to say something?
Well, I was just agreeing. You know, to tag on with where Matt was just now. I am a little bit suspicious that part of the restructuring is due to the maintenance cost and the difficulty of maintaining such a broad product base. You look at Native Instruments Complete 15, it's got 120, 200 sub products bundled in together. And it's from a business perspective, I think they're wrestling with a lot of different things. I will confess my opinion when it first came out was a little different. I saw a post from a person, and my reaction was, it's actually, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe this is a good thing for users because they had bloated a little bit too much. They had lost the thread on some of their core product lines where we weren't getting the development and the updates. It needs new fresh code base. They aren't able to allocate. And then on the flip side, to kind of get back into the minutia of the business side, I kind of look at there's two ways this can go at this point. They could be doing restructuring to lighten the load and then put more sharp focus on their core products. That's my hope. I'm optimistic in that regard. If they take the pessimistic route, this is high-level business looking at a portfolio that they're planning to chop and axe and piece out. And you see it in different companies that have what's the word? Financing when equity partners come in and they are looking at a public company and they have a large entity. Often what they start to do is cook the books in various ways so that they can leverage a sale. A great way to get into a good position of debt refinancing is to tank the books, restructure the company, chop it up and sell it off. So that's kind of a fear because at that point it becomes a question of who's the buyer. There are some good buyers out there. I look at what Yamaha did with Steinberg and I'm impressed. So there are potentially good buyers, but you can also see the flip side. There are other people who will come in wholesale just to get the user data, just to get the samples, to feed their whatever trend du jour, the AI machine that they're trying to fund. So it can go a lot of ways, but honestly, I'm a little bit hopeful, and I was turning a little bit cold on their mergers and their lack of focus because I want a better Kontakt. I'm a Kontakt power user in some ways. I mean, obviously there are people who are far more in depth. Alessandro is, you're both the developers are going to be much more deep. But as a user, Kontakt was a core portion of my business for 20 years. So I'm, I care about it. I'm hopeful. We'll see.
Yeah, in terms of like buyers, what you were saying is interesting. I was in a live stream a couple of days ago for a product that we released, and there is a YouTuber that was doing a live stream, and they obviously talked about the native instrument situations, and someone was kind of talking about the fear of someone like Splice buying native instruments as well, in a similar fashion to what I did with Spitfire Audio. And that was the same thing. I mean, Spitfire Audio is still happily running, and I don't know how they're doing, but I imagine they're still doing well. But obviously, there was that when that happened, that big sentiment of obviously with Splice being so linked to AI training data, to basically wanting nothing more than the user base that you were saying, and the acquired samples, and now there is the machine learning part of this, which is a thing, whether we want it or not. So yeah, there is that side of it as well.
Can I just say about Kontakt and the code base? It is true that it's 20 years old, but I've been talking a lot to Mario, who goes by Evil Dragon on the forums, and he used to work for Native Instruments. And that's also kind of Kontakt's strength because it makes it 100% backwards compatible. Like you can take Kontakt 8 and it can open a library made for Kontakt 2. So if they update the code base, they're going to lose that backwards compatibility, and that will be bad for small developers like you and I, because then we have to redo everything, you know.
There are good things and bad things about that. I mean, I can as someone who has dealt with Kontakt and then also like developed a couple of software from scratch and kind of collaborated with other companies in building products from scratch. There is something very freeing, obviously, about a blank canvas on the fact that you can do whatever you want and not thinking about the backwards compatibility. And Kontakt, I think that definitely suffers from that, which, as you say, it's also a good thing. But the bad thing about it is that things that 25 years ago were not basic and are now considered basic become very hard to implement. And Kontakt definitely has said that. And other software from native instruments itself don't suffer from that. So there is that element. But yeah, of course, what you say is true. I mean, this is what happens when something becomes industry standard. I know that here there are, and this very chat, there are a couple of people that can't stand Pro Tools and some other people that that use Pro Tools daily, and you know, Pro Tools is like a similar thing, pros and cons. If you look at it on paper, I guess if you do like a feature comparison, there are other digital audio workstations that are much more powerful than it. But then when it becomes a matter of user base and of compatibility, then features matter less than that, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I still develop for Kontakt 6 because I know it's going to work in Kontakt 8, and I know my customers still haven't updated. So I'm always a couple of versions behind anyway. So for me, it's great. And the fact that I don't have to worry about PC versus Mac, is it going to work? That's not my problem. That's native instruments. So that, at least for me, that's what makes Kontakt so great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Then the other thing that I'm really interested about that I haven't seen talked so much is also the fact that obviously, I mean, Native Instruments produces hardware as well. And that seems to be, I mean, it's obviously a very costly part of running the business. And so what will happen to that, I wonder, especially in the current political and economical scenario. I think that's just going to be another tricky thing. And obviously the software and the hardware are so integrated, and also we're not going to lose that. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the interesting things about just our industry in general. I mean, doing it over the years and teaching, right? Like all my students right now at NYU know really nothing about hardware, any kind of hardware, right? Like they don't even know what a CD is. They know what vinyl is and that it's supposedly cool, right? But they don't know really any of this stuff. And even when it comes to software, they don't. The students of these days know less about how computers work.
Absolutely.
That it's such a weird thing, and they all think that they want this stuff, but then they, like, I had one student who liked buying stuff. Like, I don't know, he was like a shopaholic, and he'd buy this stuff and then he'd be like, and I'm like, you don't know what it does. Like, it's not doing what you want because it doesn't do that. It never has, right? And so I think, like, you know, there is going to be a decline in hardware sales just because it's going to be like the, you know, audiophiles type thing where it's like, oh, you want this hardware because you actually understand it, but you know, we're dinosaurs.
It's such a funny thing with hardware as well, because I think hardware fetishization has never been higher. Of like not only in the actual hardware realm, but in the software realm, right? So all the, for one for better word, kids, the younger people coming into the industry, like, you know, getting in, you know, using stuff like they want to use a plugin that looks like an 1176, right? Even though none of them will have ever been anywhere near one and have no idea how they work, but that's what they want to put up in front of them, and they want other people to see them using because it looks like a thing with perfectly rendered dust on it and all this type of stuff. Because that's what plugins are like and what compressors are like, right? So I think there's this really weird double speak thing going on of people don't want hardware and don't know how it works, but they want a software version of it. But also people are making some really amazing sort of bridging sort of best of both worlds things. I can't for the life of me remember the name of it, but there's an amazing really high end I think EQ made by someone, and it's completely analog but entirely digitally controlled, so you can control every single aspect of it from automation, but it's entirely analog and stuff like that. I think that stuff's really, really exciting, and I would love to see that continue to go and the price point come down, because to have that on your desk in front of you powered from your laptop would be really amazing, because then you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. But that stuff's still incredibly expensive. Anyway, I digress. But I think people are still interested in and excited by hardware, even though they kind of don't want to buy it, if you know what I mean. Well, it's this really weird thing.
It reminds me of one of the first times I was in a professional studio, and this was back in '98. And I was working on a project that will remain nameless at the time, but I remember walking in with the sound designer, and it was one of the first times that they were doing a temp mix all in Pro Tools. He had a big SSL console in front of him. He had a rack full of gear behind him, and he was doing it all in Pro Tools, and he left everything on because it looked fancy. Right? He's like, the clients want to come in and see, right? I mix in my studio on an S1 and a dock, and I get the same sounds.
Yeah.
Right. And yes, I like having faders because there is a tactile feel to that. But I can easily take this and go to any studio, New York, LA, Europe, anywhere, and just say, install these plugins. As soon as you get into that hardware thing, I remember we had a mixer when I was a mix tech in New York. We had a mixer come over from London who brought all this hardware gear with him, and it took us 3 days to get the signal past there. Yeah, well,
very, very specific.
Yeah, it was very specific. He had a cedar noise reduction box that he needed, so that we were used to. But he brought in his own reverbs that he was like, oh, and then he had to set them up. He was having them chase MIDI scenes, which was this was 2003 or something like that. And we were mixing off of a Neve DFC. And so we had all this routing that we had to do, which, okay, yeah, cool. You're plugging in a lot of cables, but it was a pain in the ass. And then in the end, he ended up not using the MIDI chase scene thing because the movie didn't actually call for that, but he brought it with him just in case, right? I'm like, dude, you could do this all in Pro Tools with, your plugin, your automation. That's where the hardware thing sort of falls apart for me. Because even plugins, I there are certain plugins that I can't live without. Certain sound design tools that I cannot. If you want me to be able to do my job, I need to have it available. And the mix techs are like, oh, we got to install this. And I'm like, I'm bringing my iLok. All you have to do is download a zip file and open it. And they don't want to do that, right? So the hardware thing, imagine if Croto Studio was a hardware thing. And I was like, okay, you got to install this big box of Croto Studio for me to do that, right? They would flip, right?
You need to cut the tape to get a crossfade between the samples. Yeah.
Right. But I remember on a film just 2 years ago, I brought in a tablet to be a MIDI controller for me. And it was such a hassle for them to let me on their network. And I'm like, look, you want me to do my job, and you told me I couldn't do it from home. So this is what you have to do, and I'm just trying to take that and be like, oh yeah, I got to bring this EQ that's digitally controlled. They would kill me.
I think we're kind of there's several things that are kind of spinning through here. One of which is the hardware fetish, where people who have never accessed it, they feel like it's a magic thing. Right. Then there's the hardware reality where people who have used it understand that it can be cumbersome. Right. especially in our industry where you have a lot of people. Let me rephrase this. I don't want to say a lot of people. I have encountered people who buy hardware, as James was saying earlier, but they don't actually have the craftsmanship mastery to really deploy it, integrate it, make it work in a seamless way that's client focused, fast, efficient, and purposeful. And instead they get locked into this cycle of chasing things. So hardware can definitely do that. I came up right at the tail end of hardware and the start of digital. So around 99 is when I got my first DAW. And I actually started in digital, right? I had never touched hardware. So I feel like I had kind of a different perspective in that it took me 10 years of learning in software and using software before I really started to even integrate any kind of hardware. Today, the way the studio is set up, we have nice hardware, but we only use it on the input side. Once it's in the box, we stay in the box. And we deliver that way because it's efficient, it's client focused, etc. There are some times when I have a client who's very interested in mixing on the board, and we'll take the time to do that with them here, enjoying the experience. But it's not something I'm going to demand or require of the client because it is not the efficient tool always that it is. Now, from a sonic standpoint, everything digital starts in analog still. It's, with the exception of synthesis, software synthesis, anything that's acoustic, we've got to have a great analog front end. And I think that's where some people can kind of start to kind of bridge the two together and create nice hybrid systems. But a funny story relative to James about students today. I was a college professor up until 2012, taught a lot of these classes. So I saw some of the transition from the pure digital natives who weren't really skilled computer techs. And now I've got some clients that come in and, they're app users. They're iPhone generation kids. We did this album and the band they thought it was crazy they were going to get a CD. And then the album came out and the CDs were here. I got a text from the drummer like that night. He was standing in Target. He sent me a picture. Is this a CD player? He was like, if I buy this, can I play the CD? Is this a good one? And I was like,
I've not played and I've not used anything on any optical media now for about 5 years. And I'm totally cool with that.
That's really weird because we in my family, I have like a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old, and we listen to a lot of records on physical media, and I feel that they are the only 2-year-old and 6-year-old in their circles that know what this stuff is. But yeah, it's interesting. Absolutely, yeah, I can imagine.
I just think the hardware thing is very human because it's not necessary, but it makes us feel better. I'm trying to get away from my iPhone, so I've gone back to notebooks and pen and paper for the last couple of years, and now I've gotten into fountain pens for no reason. Like my thoughts aren't better because I write them with a fountain pen. I could use a pencil or a rollerball, but it makes me feel better,
For good reasons.
It is a bit snobby and
for no
pretentious,
reason,
but I like it.
it's for good reasons. Yeah, those are good reasons. And as I left digital, one of the most hardware things I got into was the synthesizer stuff, and it's like I could do it all in DAW.
Yeah.
But the truth is, when I put my hands on it and I can play it, it becomes much more human, and it becomes much more performance oriented, and it doesn't break the flow. Yes, I can program a MIDI controller, I can map the CC, but doing that technical thing breaks a creative cycle in the brain. Whereas if I'm just kind of in the motion of turning things and searching with my hands, I feel like I stay more in the inspiration. So for me, and that came from, I was scoring a commercial. It was a car company, a tire company. Dubstep was very popular at the time. Wop, 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 wop. The real filter wobble, that's really difficult to draw with a mouse. And the MIDI encoder just wasn't as fun. Finally, I wanted a filter. And when I got into that and I started playing it like a music instrument, it was like something unlocked for me. And suddenly I understood hardware in a way that was meaningful for me and very attractive. And, you know, you were talking about the pen and the pencil. My children are coming up in this education phase now, which they have never had books. They have never written pen and paper. And they didn't realize that there was a brain connection to that action that actually helped them learn things better. So they're going through the process now of using pencil and paper to actually write notes, to actually, and it's benefiting them. Those are
It
real
changes
things that I
everything.
think
Like writing
digital
things down.
overpromised, but analog still matters, you know.
Well, it's funny. I actually have a digital notebook. It's actual paper that you write on, but then you scan it and you can erase what you wrote on. So you can
Oh, I
you can
gotta know
write
what
it.
this is.
It's the Rocket Book, and so you
That's
write on
cool.
it. You take your notes because I am a like when I'm doing spotty notes and stuff like that. I'm not one of those people who likes doing it on the keyboard or on my phone or something like that. So I write it in my Rocket Book. I scan it. It can easily be emailed to the whole team because I could set up a thing that does it. And then I sort of am bridging both worlds in that way.
Yeah, same.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that like the human interface questions around like music technology and audio technology are kind of fascinating because now we're so like everyone said, like, you know, we sit at computers and do our work, even though, you know, Joe's talked about hardware, Alessandro's surrounded by hardware. I've got a
Me?
sofa.
No.
You win. But like, you know, the computer is like the worst form of human interface ever designed to do anything creative. It's a data inputting mechanism, right? A keyboard and a mouse is not designed for you to do creative or multitasking tactile things in any way, right? So I've always felt that it's kind of strange that we've ended up back at with this paradigm of like, yeah, you're doing like data entry essentially in doing like a creative art or an engineering art or technological art. It's kind of fascinating, and I think like to take that one step further, like the kind of prompt-based AI paradigm takes that to an even another dimension of like now all the tools are asking me to describe everything in natural language and type it, which has its strengths and weaknesses, but then it's another shift away, even further away from like the tactile thing that you were talking about, Joe. And I kind of find like all those questions like really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's because like we are so drawn to convenience so much that even if something is not the most creative way of doing something, if it's more convenient, we always go for it, which is the big problem, I guess, or not necessarily a problem, but something
No, it
that
is.
as people that do that at the end of the day, not talking about me, but I'm talking about live instruments, about you know, anybody that makes a tool for another creative to use, you constantly need to keep in your mind and fight with, which is interesting, definitely.
I think it depends on the objective of the tool. If the tool is like technical or surgical or corrective, like I think certain types of interfaces make sense. But if the tool is creative,
Yeah.
like Joe's example of the dubstep filter, like you want to get your hands on it, you want to, you know, yeah, you want to have the tactile thing. So I think it really depends.
Yeah, there is like the utilitarian thing. It's always like that, right? I mean, I can't even imagine using anything other than FabFilter, ProQ, or similar tools if I need to take a resonance out of a guitar track, just because why would you, right? But then if I want to
Turn your screen off and do it by ear.
no, I don't necessarily mean, but even if I'm doing it by ear on ProQ, it's just so much easier just to swipe through it, and you know, like the way that software to me is a beautiful, like just purely in terms of workflow, it's just like a work of art for me. And for me, like the FabFilter stuff is so like the way it responds to your mouse. But that's, for example, I don't know Pub Filter's books because they're not public, but I would imagine that their synthesizers are not as successful as their EQs and their compressor, and that's put for thought, I think. I mean, and again, they might be absolutely very successful. I have no idea, but I certainly don't. I'm certainly not drawn to it, to them as, or it. I can't remember how many of them there are. Maybe just one. I just can't imagine using that workflow if I need to synthesize a sound from scratch, for example.
Well, that's going back to what Joe was saying with having your hands on something. Like, it's really, for me, when I'm using software, if the interface drives me nuts, if I can't get, like, and that's one of the things that turned me off about Kontakt, is that my brain found the Falcon interface, the UVI interface, much easier to navigate than the Kontakt interface when building something. I find it much easier for me to say, I want to control this with a right click and map it to a MIDI CC on one of the controllers I have in here, easier than I have with Kontakt stuff, right? And it seems to always work no matter what. And that's always my thing whenever I'm talking with developers, is like, look, this is a great idea, but it's a pain in the ass. So I'm not going to use it. No matter how great of an idea it is, I'm not going to use it if it causes problems, right? And as new people come into the field and stuff like that, the app-based people who are like used to their iPhones or whatever, right? Maybe this dates me, but I also like to say I'm on the edge of stuff. I mean, I've taught a lot of classes on newer software for professionals that have been in the business that are like, we want to work like you do. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what I do. And they're like, oh my God, that's crazy. And I'm like, you used to cut on mag. This is not crazy compared to using a razor blade to cut a lion growl into a monkey screech. Like, come on,
I'm interested in what you said about Falcon because, for example, I love Falcon, really love it. And I think it's just fun to mess around in Falcon from a developer point of view. But I've had a similar, and the opposite experience of what you're talking about. I find Falcon to be much slower compared to Kontakt, which is why I end up using Kontakt. The beautiful thing about Kontakt that I feel nobody really successfully managed to reproduce to scale is how cleverly it loads samples in the background so that they are instantly playable. Like if you notice very heavy sample libraries like that loads a lot of gigabytes onto RAM, in Kontakt it starts loading them in the background in a very clever way, and after a few seconds you can already play it. It's really not the case with Falcon. It's really not the case on most.
That's because you're musical and you're doing like really fancy stuff. I'm making
I
big
know what you
loud
mean.
booms
But for example,
I'll wait for the booms to load, but then I'll hit.
But for example, like Falcon has some really cool sequencer, which I really envy. The synthesis in Falcon is really cool. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, the
Omnisphere does a background load similar to Kontakt.
True. Yeah,
and I've been waiting. I've been waiting on Spectrasonics to finally drop the big sampler. I mean, that's the thing they don't have in their portfolio. I've never heard any rumor of it because they don't operate that way as a company. But I'm certain that I'm certain they're cooking something big in that kitchen. And one day they're going to drop a new product, and if it's a big sampler, it could be an earthquake,
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, let's use this to kind of like pivot in the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is still related, which is we started talking about what are the other alternatives out there. We as a company explored Soundbox quite a lot. That have been chatting a lot with the team. I told you Modern. I think they're doing some really cool stuff, but obviously Soundbox is a very different product. It doesn't try to be as fully like by design is not meant to be as fully featured as Kontakt is meant to be very lightweight, is optimized for MP, and they're hopefully doing a lot more work in that. And I'm really having a lot of fun in Soundbox. Even I've never thought that I would be an iPad musician, and I'm never particularly interested in being that. But since developing for Soundbox, I've had a lot of fun making music on the iPad. Now they released something on. They released a version for Linux, which really surprised me. And we started getting customers that come from the Linux environment, because there is like a very underserved segment of the market. So it's interesting. But I wanted, in the last 10-15 minutes that we have, I wanted Nikolai to tell us a little bit about Coda, which is another sampler that I've been developing for a while. I confess that I know next to nothing about it. So Nikolai, why don't you tell us a little bit about something about that?
Well, I'm not directly involved, but back in the last fall, the team reached out to me and told me they were working on a Kontakt competitor that would solve all the problems with Kontakt, especially the legacy code thing, because this is built in a much more modern scripting language. And they were going to try and build it from the ground up and ask developers along the way what we want to see in what could be a Kontakt replacement in terms of workflow. And so they ported a few of my libraries over to Coda and asked me features I wanted to see along the way. And they actually used Bunker Symbols, my Sticks and Stones library, to showcase Coda at NAMM, which was sort of the first time the world heard about it. So it's a very small team, but they have been working very hard in secret for, I think, a year and a half now. And it's pretty close to a public beta, and they expect to have a finished version by the summer. So that's also why I wasn't freaking completely out when the news of NI broke, because I knew that Coda was coming and that it could be the next big sampler. Maybe I should say something about the team behind it, because as far as I understand, it's a small team. It's a guy named John, who you may know. He releases plugins under the name Grumpy Monkey. Has been doing that for quite a few years.
I don't know him, but I love the name.
His plugins are cool. He started doing sort of like multi-script plugins for Kontakt. He built things that lets you play arpeggios and things like a harp glissando and things like that. Then he started building his own VSTs, plugins based on what he learned from that. And Steven is the other coder on the team. He used to work for SoundPaint. He was a editor and software engineer for SoundPaint.
Which is by ADO, if someone doesn't know, if anyone doesn't know. Yeah.
Yes. He left, and now he's doing his own thing, which is Coda. Then you got Jaden, who helps Mike run the VI control forum, and he is sort of product designer and strategist for the whole project. And then I guess they got it to a point where they had something to show, and then they approached Mike Green, who owns Realitone and the VI control forum. Yeah. So Mike is the money man, is my understanding. He's the one financing all the development. And they're going to have some kind of marketplace, I think is the idea, for smaller developers as well. So, but we can also hopefully be able to sell plugins on our own. So I've told my customers now that if they buy a Kontakt instrument now, and if Native Instrument goes under, they will get the Coda version for free. So that's sort of been my way out of this mess. But I'm also very excited about what I'm seeing in Coda, and the team has been very receptive to my suggestions. Like, for me, the big thing about Kontakt are the modulation curves. The custom modulation curves. So I know they're working on that now. The other cool thing about Coda, there's a video, I guess we can link to it somewhere, where they show off at NAMM, is that they have basically a DAW workflow for sample editing inside the sampler itself. So if that works out the way I hope, gone are the days, of recording your samples and then editing them in the kind of DAW and then exporting to the sampler and then programming everything. Now you can do sort of everything in one program, and you can line up, like if you're crossfading from between two legato samples, you can line up the samples exactly where you want to push the crossfade, and then that's all you have to do. And if you try through legato instruments in Kontakt, you know what a big pain in the ass that is. Doing it the old-fashioned way and working out timings in milliseconds and REX and whatever DAW you're working in. So that could be a game changer. Like programming legato, it's going to be a lot of things we'll be able to do without even scripting. Like legato scripting is going to be built in. It has its own scripting language, so you can keep adding features, whatever you can think of, like you can in KSP and Kontakt now. But a lot of the things that we have to spend hundreds of thousands of lines of code doing in Kontakt, it will do right out of the box. So I'm excited about that.
Nice. That sounds very promising. Yeah, you touched on something that we didn't really talk about, which was also like the licensing part of all these samplers, which I think that is something that the end user is the least interested about, but and that we need to deal with as developers. But obviously, this stuff does end up shaping the the product that we end up making, because obviously I mean, Native Instruments, the way it works is that if you want to, well, there are a couple of things the way they can work with Kontakt. So you can take the Nikolai approach. You don't do any NKS library, right, Nikolai? None of yours, or yours are
No,
all for
because
Kontakt full, right?
yeah, everything I've done is for Kontakt full. Or
Yeah.
maybe that was a bad business decision, but
No,
I
it's
see.
just very different. Yeah, I mean, so you can take this approach where you basically rely on the end user owning the full version of Kontakt, which it's expensive. How much is it? Is it like $400 or something like that? I can't remember.
It's $400, but you can get it for cheaper. During the sales and with the cross grades, you can get it down to about $100. But that's still
And then there are a lot of
money for a lot of
people. There are a lot of people like me that owned it since Kontakt 4 or something, and I think that's when I started buying Kontakt, and then upgraded. Obviously, the upgrades are much lower, and you're relying on users, on a massive user base, and you don't get all the NKS, the perks of NKS, which is the software integration, the fact that it shows up on the library tab in Kontakt, and a few other things. But you don't need to pay any sort of license to Native Instruments. Or there is the approach that we, like Sonora Cinematic, as Sonora Cinematic takes, where basically we do all our Kontakt libraries are NKS compatible, so they're all compatible with the software. They have all the perks of NKS, like the custom graphics and like the showing up on the library and all that. And our library work with the free Kontakt player, so we don't require our customers to own the full version of Kontakt, but to do so we pay a fee to Native Instruments, which is typically a one-off encoding fee and a percentage on all the sales that we make on single units, and that obviously does end up shaping the tools that you do, of course, the strategy that you take. And I never released a library for Falcon, but I imagine they would have a somewhat similar deal. Soundbox is different. For example, Soundbox, the player is free. We don't pay any licensing fee to Audio Modern, which is the reason why we managed to price the libraries a bit cheaper, and the end user can use the free version of it. But the way Audio Modern makes their money is by locking all the sampling feature of Audio Modern, of Soundbox, which you can unlock by purchasing one of Audio Modern libraries. So they monetize the product that way. So there are all different strategies, and the way Koda and whoever comes on the market are going to approach this is going to make a big difference in terms of what products end up being made for these platforms, which in the end is what matters, I guess. Right.
Yeah, I've been talking to Mike about what they're going to do with licensing, and it's still undecided, basically, because he's looked at all the feedback he's gotten, and of course he's as as frustrated with the licensing model Native Instrument as I have been, because I make sort of niche experimental products, and if I have to spend $4,000 on licenses and then it sell 20 copies, then I've lost a lot of money. So by not releasing for Kontakt Player, I can take more risk. So it will be exciting to see what they do with that.
Yeah, to clarify, this point is important actually. One of the things that many developers always complained about is that I said that you spend a one-off licensing fee, which is actually not that expensive, and it's waived in some cases, specifically if you develop for Kontakt 8. But then you by the way, all this information is publicly available on the Native Instruments website, so you can look it up. But basically, the thing that annoyed a lot of developers that I know is the fact that you don't just pay a percentage of the sales, but the fact that you need to buy serial numbers in advance. So you can buy a minimum of, I think, is 100 serials and spend money on that. That you give to Native Instruments, and then you need to sell the stock. So it's quite an upfront investment for developers, and which I guess is what Mike was referring to when he talks about the licensing model in Native Instruments. But that there is definitely that.
It's a bit unfriendly because you kind of have to guess how successful your product is going to be. Because the more licenses you buy, the cheaper they are per license, but you're locked into that pricing structure for the life of the product.
Yeah.
So if you play it safe and buy 100 licenses and it takes off and becomes a big success, then you have to buy all these extra licenses at a very high price. And that, I don't think that's entirely fair.
Absolutely.
Guys, I'm going to have to jump in quickly, so I have to run to another call. Thank you so much for having me.
Of
Lovely
course.
to see you all.
Bye, Matt. Thanks
Joe,
for
it's the first time
joining us.
actually seeing you, but great to speak to you again. And Nikolai, great to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Thank you for having me on board. Would love to come back again next time.
Fantastic. Bye, Matt. Thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
us. Yes, we can also wrapping up. The 1 hour mark is getting closer. I just want to thank you guys for doing this experiment with me. Who am I gonna start with? We started with Joe, so let's end with Joe as well. Joe, what are you working on? Anything that you can share or want to plug?
Sure.
This is the time.
Well, first, thank you for having and hosting this conversation. I thought it was a lot of fun. It's a pleasure to meet everyone. Fantastic coffee chat. What am I working on? I would actually have to look at my calendar to even tell you. The studio is humming. Somewhere around December, I realized we were currently in production for 10 to 12 records from different artists.
Wow.
Some of them were just mastering and distribution. Some of them are full tracking production. Just finished a film at the end of last year, a feature documentary. Was going to start another one here in February, but we couldn't really work out the logistics and the deal and stuff like that. But the studio is surviving. I think that's my big statement is in a world where you think studios are dying for some reason, we've found a niche that works well for us. We are balancing a lot of different roles and hats with that. Whether custom music for ad agencies and various things is a small part of it. Sound design is a small part of it. Tracking, and you add it all up together, and we're surviving, and that's the big announcement that I have and I'm proud of is just this is year 14.
Wow.
Of surviving in this crazy world. And a pleasure to meet other people that are surviving and thriving as well. It's great talking with everyone, and I'm just glad to be here. So
Amazing. Thank you so much. James, how about you?
Currently finishing up a Netflix series that I'm working on. The 4 seasons, season 2, which if they stay on schedule,
Oh, sorry. I thought you said the
think-
4th season, but you meant the 4th season is the name of the
4
series.
seasons, yes. The TV show based off of the
yes.
movie. From
Absolutely. Another one. I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, kind of in Joe's vein of like, it's been a weird industry recently for television and film, especially. I'm happy to have had this work, and it's a crew that I've worked with. I mean, I've worked with Little Stranger Productions for 20 years now, I think. I discovered back when 30 Rock first started, and I've been working with the same re-recording mixer and editors that whole time with them. So that's just always a fun thing. Trying to get a couple other fires in the going to keep this year busier than last year. But otherwise, I'm teaching at NYU, and I got a couple other things that I'm kind of working on. I might release a sound library, which I haven't done before,
Oh, nice.
but I have a lot of recordings that, I might as well share with people and maybe help my family at the same time. Um, but yeah, no, just making noise pretty much is what I do.
Amazing. Nikolai, how
Love
about
it.
you?
Well, I just released a new product a week ago because
saw.
I live in Vietnam and I work with a lot of traditional musicians, and they have some really cool instruments here. So I've kind of slowly started a series of unique Vietnamese instruments, and this is the rung. It looks like that. It's from the Central Highlands. It's basically a bamboo xylophone. The early versions from hundreds of years ago were just the thing in the middle, which is tuned pentatonic. But the modern version, like this, is completely chromatic, 3.5 octaves, and it's played with these sort of crazy double-headed mallets, which are exactly the distance of an octave of the instrument, so they can play octaves and octave rolls. And I think it's the world's first drum sample library, as far as I know. I couldn't find any when I looked, and it's only $25 on intro price for the rest of the month. So you should buy it. It runs on Kontakt.
I'm
Take
interested.
my money.
I'm
Here.
interested in the. I'm interested in the mallet. So what does it mean that they're like stuck together, or they like a vibraphone where they can play octaves like that, or are they like stuck together like that? You know what I mean?
No, it's two separate mallets, but each mallet has two heads on it. So there's four
Oh, right.
mallet
So it
heads in
goes like
total,
that. I
and they
see.
play them like this. If you watch the walkthrough, my friend Twee, who recorded this instrument for me, demonstrates it at the beginning. So it's two hardwood mallets, and then they're tied to a piece of flexible bamboo in the middle to get that spring. So it's quite a clever instrument, and it's a very bright and punchy sound. Be very, very loud and very, very soft. Traditionally, it was played outside, so it needed to be loud. But now it's more. It's used all over Vietnam. You see it every time you see traditional shows or concerts. They have the rungs on stage, and now it's used in Vietnamese pop and hip hop, and because it's sort of like a symbol of Vietnamese music. And I thought it was crazy. Nobody had sampled it before, so I did.
That's awesome. Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much for doing this with me again, guys. And yeah, let's see how it goes. And I really had a lot of fun. Hopefully we can, hopefully it does well and we can keep doing this. Thank you so much again.